Pawn d4 on the board by Slovenian guildmaster Vladimir Fedoseev, and his opponent, world number 2, goes d5. It's Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. This is the Tata Steel Chess tournament, elite chess in the Netherlands, round 5 here. One of the players takes home a great win and calls it the best technical chess game of their life. Wow, double brilliancy to come. Let's dive in. C4 played, they're over the board, classical chess time control, the ponies gallop into the game, and Fabi plays the onomatopoeic bishop b4, the Ragozin variation, looking to rip the raggedy army of Fedoseev to shreds and smote their ruin upon the mountainside. It's an aggressive opening. What a game this is. Fedoseev goes bishop g5 with a whoosh, not to be outdone. h6 puts the question, and he gives up the bishop pair already. Is he really a guildmaster or a very naughty boy? You normally hold on to those, but okay, after queen a4 check, only way to not lose a bishop is knight c6. Tiny bit awkward, blocking the c pawn now, and white's got a healthy lead in development despite having given the bishops. We see castles, bishop e2. Now you gobble on c4 so that white loses a tempo, but first we see castles, quick king safety fist bump, exploded out. Great etiquette we're seeing in Vaikanze. That's where the tournament's being played. And now queen e7, pours some sugar on that bishop. We're going to see why the stinky knight a5 is played. You know, in the words of Tanya Sachdev, knight on the edge, fall off the hedge. You don't normally want them there, but okay, you have to do something with the bishop. It retreats, and now Fabi unravels things. Now, why does he take on c3 here? Well, if you play this move immediately, which he plays next move, we see a problem after knight e4. a3 is on the way, and the bishop is kind of running out of squares, you know, a bit clumsy, treading on the same toes as the queen. So we come back, takes was played, changes the structure here, and now pawn to b6, protects the knight, presumably prepares to fianchetto the rook, and now you could just go for something a bit steady. There is an awesome plan here with bishop b1, setting up a battery as well, different game, but Fedoseev offers the queen exchange here, trying to bail out to this endgame. You don't want to be taking massive pressure down the c-file, knight stumbling around, difficult to get c5 in. So that wasn't played. Queen d6, good move, offering the exchange on Fabi's terms, and after rook fd1, bishop b7, sanity prevailing, no rook going to that square, we don't see anything done about this knight. You know, how many beginner players are going bishop e2 here? Very meek, very soft. That bishop's well placed. Whoops. I've clearly had a drink. No, I haven't. But this isn't actually a problem. Once the rook comes to the center, if black does this, big whoop-dee. You capture like this, something like f4's on the way, the bishop's coming to e4, sit cover the king, great center, good for white, not a big deal at all. This one's still in Siberia. So rook ac8 was played instead, prepares to push that c-pawn, and so that's why now Fedoseev takes. Not the most incisive move, definitely doesn't give him advantage. In fact, Fabi is slightly better now, very understandable when he's the one targeting a backwards pawn. Imagine if he could sit on it one day, that would be unpleasant. I know you can't play this right now, but you get the positional ideas. So that's why knight d2 fights for this explosive dynamite c4 square, and we see the rooks now double stacking on the file. Both players following the suit. We're going to see a massive rook blender in a moment. Absolutely love it. First, Vladimir sets up the big white center here. Fabi strikes out with g5, good move, just gaining some space, stopping a massive center in the future. King f2, and now you could play bishop c6, a kind of nudgy waiting move. Even invite bishop a6 and a bounce back of the bishops, whereupon you could get a threefold repetition, that kind of thing. But instead, we see the very provocative pawn e5 here. Fabi pushes that king pawn, weakens some critical squares, and the game really sharpens up now, even though it's just an endgame. So the pony starts maneuvering. Hello f5, my old friend. Takes on d4, and now we see the rook blender turned on at the wall. They all go in. We're in a minor piece endgame, and now Fabi, possibly despairing at his position here, some think he's about to resign because he plays bishop c8. And it looks like he's preemptively setting up for the next game. But watch where that bishop's headed, because after bishop d3, slight domination of the knight, therefore it re-enters the game. We get king e3 covering the pawn, reminiscent of the time that Vidit tried to eat Hikaru's king. Very surprising move, especially when he'd already had a hearty breakfast of mushrooms with his good friend and mentor Vishy Anand. Brother called Fishy Anand, by the way, invented stockfish. Very few people know that. And back to this game here, Fabi now just goes for it, concocts a prawn cocktail here, just can't stop pushing them. And after knight b3, he could go king c7, well, sorry, king d8, king c7, that kind of thing, rotate round the king. Presumably, he didn't like the look of d5 and allowing the king in, that kind of thing. But an equilibrium is held. You maintain control here. But Fabi plays the trigger happy pawn d5 here. Now, it isn't such a bad move, but you do give up this massive square, and I love the response now. e5 looks so tempting, right, and very playable, but you release all the tension in the center, and this tension's favoring white. You know, if ever takes, well, you set up that massive center. So instead, we see knight c5. Really nice chess from Vladimir. We see king d6, and it's setting up a sneaky shot. The bishop tucks back to c2, maybe ideas of a4 soon, and now we get the awesome knight e5. I bet you didn't see that coming, right? I didn't. What's the idea? Well, if you take here, you take here, and black's doing absolutely fine here, even marginally better. The bishop's going to spring out. You always have to be a bit careful with black having the 2-on-1 over here, decent in endgames. But okay, not played. Instead, we see bishop b3. The knight hits this square with check. The king goes. The knight drops back to b6 now. a4 very playable, but not done. We get king c3, and it gives Fabi a chance to go a5. The Silicon Overlord now purring as the game returns to dead level here. Upon a4, you can go b4. Therefore, instead, we see pawn a3. f6 played now, setting up a lovely camel toe pawn formation. We get bishop a2, king c6, g3 now played, and after bishop h3, Fabi taking advantage of the last move, maybe looking for this kind of stuff. Now we get the knight drop back to b3, hit this pawn, which is going to drop with check, and it's absolute crunch time. Now, first off, what if you push that pawn there? Well, playable, yes, the knight could check, or it could come to d2, but it does look a little bit ugly. You just gave up a very big square. The pawns are now frozen for eternity, whereas whites are a bit more fluid in the center. Not necessarily ideal. And if instead you play this move, best, well, it holds the game at a level balance, but the line here is crazy because you have to calculate this, because the pawn's under attack, by the way, and you can't go king b2. So what if you go this, and then imagine king takes, this is a terrible move, and now not pushing a4, which would undermine the knight, but you can actually take here, and there's pins. You know, it's terrible. So the idea is, after takes with check, you go king b6. This is what the engine wants. Cover the pawn right, and now when a4 comes to undermine the knight, you can go b4 check. This is absolutely wild, because if the knight is taken, this is a checkmate. I mean, that is just one of the greatest checkmates I've seen in a long, long time. Wow. Imagine if that line had been found. So understandably, Fabi didn't go knight c4, because you've got to see this entire crazy checkmating line with b4 and all that nonsense. So instead, he goes knight a4 check. The king goes this way, and now you're in a bit of a world of pain. Perhaps taking on e4 best, then going king b6. But you connect these pawns right, looks really scary. So Fabi now plays the move, but it's a blunder of bishop g2. By the way, if king b6, well, then it looks a bit scary, leaving the pawn to hang in the center and everything, right? So this was how he played. Goes for the pawn here, but he's missed a really good shot from Fedoseev. pawn e5 played in response. And if you execute the threat that you were going for, now you can gobble here, or you could also take with check first, and the end games are terrible. You know, here's one sample line. You spin round to stop the advance of the pawn, but then you can take here with check, and things are just collapsing. I mean, here's one knight where you give the knight, take in the center, win back the bishop, and this is just a hopelessly lost endgame. King's marching in, you've got the passer, plus you can always get round here at times, even if this all gets liquidated. Really good endgame. So it's just awful now for Fabi. He takes, pawn recaptures, definitely don't take on f3 now, or you run into a monster fork, bye-bye bishop. So instead we see the move of b4, and we don't even see Fedoseev worrying about this one. He plays accurately now, pushing that pawn there, but first going check, king c7 best, because after king c5, awesome response now from Fedoseev, the first of two brilliancies. He doesn't move the pony, he pushes on through the center with e6.
Pooh, what a move. What a move.
Because if you capture here, of course the pawn's running. You know, you can't bounce back in time, nor can the knight. That's game over. So therefore, the king has to meekly step back, tail between the legs, tempo lost. Now we see takes on b4, and the second brilliancy in 3 moves is landed on the board. Here we go. Can you guess the move? I'm sure you can when you see the themes of the running pawn. It takes on d5 here. Wow.
Okay, of course, report immediately. I mean, no doubt about this player. Absolutely no doubt. So, reporting. Was he a good spot? No, he was not a good spot.
Not only do you now allow the pawn to run if king takes, but you even cover f3. Well, actually, I'm talking nonsense. That was covered anyway. Long story short, white is just killing it now. So we see bishop f1 re-entering the game. Bishop b3 hits the knight, a seahorse is born. Now we see the knight check from f5, more accurate chess, covering e7. Of course the pawn covers here, great harmony between these minors and the pawn. So king e5 played, knight hit, pawn also hit now twice by king and knight. So we see e7 preparing to queen, check, the king goes, the bishop has to stop the advance of the pawn, and bishop c4 is a very sneaky move, stopping that one from taking, or else the pawn is made. So bishop a4 is played, and now knight g7 prepares to queen, and it's absolutely unstoppable. Fabi goes for the counterplay with this. We see check, the king marches in, the bishop's under fire, it jumps into f7, 2 pieces now supporting the promotion. Fabi goes for the check, of course gets his own b pawn running now, first supported by the king, but it's just too little too late, because after the queen is born, now we see takes, this one recaptures, and it allows this bishop to stay on the long diagonal, chop this one off, sacrifice itself for the good of the cause, and here we see resignation after king e2, because this one is marching in. You know, what's a sample line? Was it king c3 I was looking at? No, let me go back, king c4. So let's show a couple of moves. Knight under fire, say you cover it, well now this one checks and you force the king away. That's a lost endgame here. And say you don't cover it, say you move this knight to, what was I looking at? Knight f6, you're going to lose a knight. Knight c5, let's say. Well, this one now attacks the pawns, and what to do? h5, you take that pawn. You know, it's just absolutely dead in the water. Too much material, this is lost. So this was the final move of the game. Great technical win by Fedoseev there. Really strong tournament he's having, and he's also on his way to freestyle chess next month. He qualified for that one. He's in some good form. Hope you enjoyed. Have a look at the video on screen for some more epic chess, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.